What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favelli coming at you with the one, the only, the certified fantabulous Mr. Grant Hughes. The offseason look-ahead train rolls onward. We're on to the Charlotte Hornets, as anyone can see if they're watching on YouTube. Grant, how are you feeling about this team as we enter their offseason?
I feel like I should take a 30-minute pause to think about my answer to convey the Charlotte Hornets level of patience. Because
Nice.
that's the kind of team the Charlotte Hornets are.
They're now under the new regime for sure. Is they've at each of the past trade deadlines they prioritize just getting some extra picks in there, trading away talent, taking on this year was Yusuf Nurkic's money. Last year it was Grant Williams's. But they're in sort of a weird spot now to where I'm guessing you think that they're going to remain patient, which is probably the right call. But we should go through their offseason vitals here to see what they're working with, what decisions they have to make. They project to be about $12 million under the tax. This includes the Tre Mann RFA hold, which checks in at $14.7 million. It also includes guaranteeing Josh Okogie at $7.8 million. And it, of course, includes the number 4 overall pick. Let's start there, just because those impact their immediate finances. Tre Mann disappeared this year, due to injury, basically. I don't even know what to figure. Is $14.7 million, does he even get that? And if he does, is it more than one guaranteed year at this point after all the injuries he's dealing with?
And isn't his qualifying offer just under $7 million? So is he getting that? That? I mean, maybe. You're definitely he's no. So answering your question, no, he will not get anything approaching. That's basically mid-level money. He's not touching that. There's no way.
So they're going to be working then, in all likelihood, with the non-taxpayer mid-level themselves. What do you view as just sort of, before getting into a little bit of their own decisions, what trades they would consider making, what do you view as their biggest need right now?
I think their biggest need is probably figuring out if LaMelo Ball is the guy we're building around, or is it a player we don't even have, or is it whatever Brandon Miller's timeline is? That's not the question you're asking, but they're far enough, down the standings and early enough in this rebuild that I don't think you go well, they need a 3-and-D wing, or they need I mean, they kind of have a rim rolling center in Mark Williams, who we can talk about, but I don't view them as a team that kind of gets to say we need this type of player. It's kind of like in a draft, it's it's a best player available situation. That's kind of where
it's
the
it's
Hornets
you
are.
don't not draft Dylan Harper because
No.
you have anybody on, if he's still available for some reason at number 4. You don't not draft VJ Edgecombe because of anybody on this roster.
Yeah. No, I think the Hornets feel to me like a team that's kind of, I mean, Ball complicates it. I'm sure we'll talk about him in some hypothetical trade stuff, but they feel like a team that is kind of hunkered down in a bunker, just waiting to see what the second apron fallout is around the league. And then once that's clear, they're okay, so here's what we should do. And now we'll start, because they set the timeline back 2 years in a row, right? With just the way they've operated, trying to get, first round assets here and there, with taking on iffy money and just being careful, which is if you're a Hornets fan, maybe this isn't super fun, but man, this is just a more promising tack than what they'd been operating, or what they'd been trying to do before. So I don't know what the needs are. I don't think that's even that's not the type of question this team should be asking itself, right?
No, I guess if you were looking at fit, a lot of it will depend on, you could say they still kind of need a 5 of the future, depending on what's going to happen with Mark Williams. But the idea of what Tre Mann is, who's the secondary offensive option on this team moving forward? Is Brandon Miller going to be that good to be that player? Because then you could kind of move your focus off that. Miles Bridges is that's not going to be the guy. He's certainly not going to be the guy long term. So they could still use that. They do also need though, all right, Brandon Miller, we still don't know what he's going to become. I think, his progress was, I'll call it incremental based off what I saw last season before his own injury. You do you mentioned a 3-and-D wing. They do really need, good net positive, impact wing defenders here. And, Josh Okogie is fine, but he's not going to give you a lot on offense. And then I don't think you want Brandon Miller as your most important wing defender moving forward. And I was against the trade at the time. I still don't understand why they did it. Josh Green ain't that guy either, Grant.
Have you heard he can pass on the move, though? Maybe what they need is an up-tempo offense that allows Josh Green to move more should
So you need to trade LaMelo to make sure that Josh Green gets more of those on-ball reps, is what you're saying.
No, he doesn't even need. He just needs to be moving while he's passing. That's what he's good at. That's where Josh Green really shines. It's been a long time since I did the Josh Green bit. It feels good. Yeah, no, I mean, what they need is a cornerstone if it's not LaMelo, right? Maybe that's the simplest way to boil it down. And maybe that guy comes at number 4, and maybe you're waiting another year. I don't know.
There is pressure on them to nail this pick, and it feels a little different than last year because I guess Trey Johnson could sneak in here, but it feels like they're just going to take who's left over from Dylan Harper or VJ Edgecombe so that the decision's kind of made.
It might be Bailey.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, that's what I meant. I meant Bailey or Edgecombe. Because it just feels like those are going to be like the Sixers decide, or whoever's drafting at number 3 decides between those two, and then Charlotte takes who's ever left over. But like the Tijon Salon experience was not great, and it's just you can call him a rookie, but I went through for this specific purpose of just like, okay, like who are the players in the rookie season who logged over 1,000 minutes, had a true shooting percentage as bad with a box plus minus. He was at minus 5.6, so I said it at minus 5 or worse. The list is not great. I will include the 3 best players to come out of that list so far: Jalen Suggs, Jordan Poole, and Austin Rivers. And so that's like,
Those are very different players than Salon too.
So he's high energy, so like it could be kind of fun to watch him play. But there is, when you turn looking at some of the players that went after him, especially like Zach Edey could have worked here, or Donovan Clingan would have made a lot of sense, especially when you tried to turn around and trade Mark Williams anyway. Not the traditional above the rim guys that maybe you want next to LaMelo. There's pressure on them to nail that pick, but there's also, I wonder if some of the pressure's off because if you just take who's ever left over out of Edgecombe or Bailey, I would assume that you're almost off the hook regardless of what happens.
I kind of like their draft position for that reason. I mean, Bailey.
I'm anti-pressure.
Yeah, right. I would like someone to make my decision for me, is what I'm saying, and that is really where they're at. Although, like, if it's Edgecombe, I think it's easy. But if it is Bailey, I've just, I don't know how much you've read up yet. I haven't done a lot of draft prep, but like, that's a polarizing guy. He's that I would feel much less comfortable if it's Bailey on the board than if it were Edgecombe. I think Edgecombe's just like, you just take that guy. And again, having done not enough draft prep yet, but I think they're in a decent position draft wise. But like, I want to back up. They got to trade Mark Williams, right? Like, I mean,
extension eligible Mark Williams, who has missed more games than he's played in for his career, for anyone who cares.
I just mean like they did trade. It's just for the vibes. Like you did trade him. Like and then you can't just have him around.
I mean, he did play well to close the year after that trade. Okay. My whole thing is just anything you've seen from him, and the sample size has been limited. Do you believe that he can be the anchor, like the backline anchor of a really good defense?
No. I think he. Well, I was gonna frame it like, do you think it's likely that he'll be better than the 15th best starting center in the league, or like 20th best starting center? Like that's the range he's in now, I think, if you're being generous, and certainly not if you're pricing in availability. So it's like in some ways Charlotte has kind of seen what it needs to see, I think. And they did. They traded him. They decided that he's not like that we don't want him around.
Do you know what was great about that trade? It kind of reinforced the vision of the front office to where it's like, well, we're shorting the Lakers' future long term. What was it? They were getting a 2031 pick and a 2030 swap. And then Dalton Connect, sure, just that you could add some, like, they could use some dead-eye shooters around LaMelo for sure. I think that still needs to be the plan, but now that you've telegraphed that you don't want him, you're not getting, even if the Lakers were going to trade for him, they're not giving up that package because they already decided that they were drunk or something.
You're never doing better than that package. Like that was a good return. Like that was a massive win.
I had to grade that trade when we all thought it was going to happen, and I destroyed the Lakers for it. And I gave the Hornets. And it's Mark Williams is a good player. I just don't headed towards his next. And even if you're the Hornets, what is the money you're willing to give him to say, well, maybe he'll be more valuable on an extension? Is it just 4 and 60? Is that too much?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that ups his value. That's the thing. Like, I just don't think there's a scenario where he becomes more. One, that offer was bonkers, and two, like his value is not increasing as he gets more expensive. That's just like he's not that caliber of player, I don't think. So yeah, I don't know. So I started this by saying like you got to trade him, but it's like, well, his value is pretty low right now relative to what it was 6 months ago.
For them, because we know what kind of timeline they're on, it's not the worst outcome in the world to see like, well, can he stay healthy and maybe he ups his value ahead of restricted free agency before the trade deadline. Here's the thing, and I don't want to go back to the LaMelo Ball but when you're looking at this Hornets team, if you decide that LaMelo Ball is worth keeping around, which I think is a totally reasonable decision, and if I were the Hornets, I would not move him, especially coming off the way he finished the season, injured and inefficient. But like, there's no make or break thing happening here this year. There's a lot of other teams are approaching these inflection points, and the only way the Charlotte Hornets are there is if you think, one, LaMelo Ball is not the guy, and two, that he can't be scaled to a situation where you found your guy and you're kind of pulling his role back, and then three, that you think you could get a ton of value for him in a trade right now, which anyone who's listening to this podcast knows I would give up a lot for LaMelo Ball because I think he is a transcendent offensive player, and if he could stay healthy, there's a lot of like seller's remorse potential there for Charlotte. But I could say like with some semblance of certainty, he's not viewed that way like around the league at all.
No, I was going to add, you kind of touched on it, but like like you as the Hornets are just, you've got more information than anybody else, and you're just going to conclude that like what everybody thought about Steph Curry and his ankles is actually true about LaMelo, and you're never getting a full season. I don't know how any of us outside could know that, but maybe Charlotte knows that. And maybe what happens is you trade LaMelo and that trade gets voided by another team that's like, nah, he's not good enough. He's not healthy enough. And it's Mark Williams all over again, just on a larger scale. I agree with you mostly about like there's nothing seismic that's going to happen. And I think Ball still has quite a bit of value. But I would say that trading Ball would be a pretty significant like make or break is the phrase you use, but like that's a turning point at least, right? Like that's a pretty meaningful sort of reassessment of where the Hornets are if you move off of him, because like you've already paid him his max, or the rookie max. You've oriented the team around him to some extent, and to move him would be just to say like, here comes 4 to 5 more years of us building because we don't have the guy. Like that's a big deal, even though like, you know, with him, they got an all-star season out of him and they were half decent, whatever that was, 21, 22 maybe, when they won, I forget, like they were in the play-in mix. But like, it hasn't been great. And part of that's because he's been hurt, but part of that's because like the team just isn't good enough with him leading it and the talent they have around it. So like, I would think pretty hard about trading him, knowing that you're really setting the clock back even farther.
That's interesting because what is the team that's coming in with like if I was Orlando, yes,
sure,
but they're not going to do that. We just know like too much about Orlando. Houston should do it. I don't think they would do it. And so it's just like you could identify teams that maybe should give up the moon for LaMelo. Like would be really interesting. Again, should I make the note? We've entered we're just asking questions portion.
Yes,
of the
I have
podcast.
I'm also prepared to ask some questions on this front.
Would you do like what if Portland was just
my
like
team, Dan. Damn it. That was the team.
Okay, so it's like, can we build something around Scoot and number 11 and like what else needs to be in there?
Yep. They have some of their young players. They have a trillion of them. I think Portland is a really interesting landing spot for him. And I'm super annoyed. So my Portland parentheses for Scoot and young pieces. So we're hive minded. I mean, like you could go. What about like, I mean, Brooklyn, New Orleans. You take back the DeJounte Murray contract and you get some picks. Maybe you can. Don't the Pelicans still have a Lakers pick out there somewhere, or they've got some from the Bucks that. You know, if you want,
they have swaps from they control the Bucks picks in 20. They're the team that has them in 26 and 27 via swaps.
Yeah, get a hold of some of that, and you're helping the Pelicans out by taking Murray's money too. So you could really ask for the moon draft asset wise. I mean, like Utah, that's just a weird fit, but like I don't know.
No, Utah would be so much fun under Will Hardy.
They need somebody. They don't have anything close to like a foundational player. Detroit. Like what? How fun! That's
next to Cade, that would be insane.
So there's a lot of teams that I think that's all to say. The market for LaMelo, even though I kind of just bashed him, is like it's there. I think it's there, and it's all teams that are mostly young and just should be. He's not a second draft guy. We're way too deep for that. But it's like, what if you put him on a team with a bunch of real players, like and he stays healthy, like the conversation could be very different about him a year from now if that happens.
Would you do, if you're Charlotte, as the baseline of number 4, LaMelo, and Dallas's 2027 first? And by the way, the Hornets can trade up to 5 first-round picks this year, 4 of their own plus that Dallas pick. Are you giving that up for a Cooper Flag?
Oh, you got to. I think you got to.
Does that even get Dallas thinking?
I don't think so. Well, does it get him thinking? Getting that 27
number
back.
4, you're giving up LaMelo and a first-round pick, top 2 protected first-round pick, on a team that, quite frankly, isn't guaranteed to be good in 2020, but it has more value to Dallas than any other team. LaMelo and a first-round pick to move up 3 spots.
Okay, here's why this isn't happening. I've heard it said that Dallas really cares about like conditioning and defense and like professionalism and work ethic, and so you're gonna dump Luka and replace him with LaMelo Ball. Like that's the move. How does Nico Harrison explain that one?
He still can't explain the Luka Doncic trade, so I'm not ruling out anything for Dallas.
He'll explain it with a straight face, and it won't make sense, I guess, is the stock answer.
Now, this is an interesting place to end, to keep it like we don't want to be just the LaMelo Ball trade podcast like every other one is. You mentioned what happens if you put LaMelo Ball on a team with serious players. And I think right now, you just go look at the people can criticize LaMelo Ball. There's real criticisms to be had. The supporting cast, even if you think it's been good enough, it has not been available enough. And look, he's part of that. When you look at the catch-all metrics, like his teammates just grade out in like the 1 to 10th percentile of all the things that matter. Like in sum, is there going to be any, like when do you finally feel compelled to say, well, we need to be the team that puts real players around him to see what we look like versus, because that informs your timeline and informs what you're going to do with LaMelo, because we're getting to a point where it's, all right, he has 4 years left on his rookie scale, including next season? Not his rookie scale, the rookie max.
He's on the books for 37.9 next season, 40, 43, 46. So he's got 4 full years left.
So I would say this is your last fuck around season then, because you need data points on what does he look like independent of a rebuild. And I'm not saying he's culpable in some of it, but you look at who was in charge beforehand, like the Hornets weren't well run. So like as Charlotte, do you think there's any temptation to say like, well, do we need to do something to put some real players in here that I don't want to, this isn't a 2 timeline approach, but I don't even know what would be a good analog for them, but like we need to get some veterans in here in addition to developing number 4, Brandon Miller.
I think the issues of the timeline and a LaMelo trade are inseparable, because you're right. Like if you're going to keep, we want picks, we want assets, we want flexibility, we want young players. If you're going to keep going that route, then you're never going to see like what LaMelo Ball could do with, serious veteran players, because you just will not have that team. And so then you must trade him if that's the plan, right? Because like you won't, like the longer this goes on, where he's just surrounded by like, a G League roster or whatever, a bunch of rookies and stuff, his value's not going up, because he's just not going to look as good if he's surrounded by inferior talent. And so, and if he is your guy, then you need to fast track the time, not like go crazy, but like you do need to put real players around him. So you can't really have it. You can't have it both ways, I don't think. I think, and like it does seem like everything Charlotte's doing is suggesting like you just should trade Ball because they're getting younger and cheaper and more flexible and getting more draft assets. So like, how are you like? You got to pick one, I guess, is where I would land on it.
I would like to see them, because I don't think they're going to trade LaMelo. I think maybe that's what Shams was hinting at when he said this is going to be the wildest offseason he can remember. I would love to see them. I think there's like defensive issues, but I think like the way that they've like, I think I would just like to see them put more shooting around LaMelo. That's what I want, just dead eye shooting. It's just like if you had the opportunity to be like, Denver's looking to cut costs, extend the rotation, I don't know if it improves it, and said, we'll give you Michael Porter Jr. for Grant Williams and Josh Green. I'm probably striking that deal if I'm Charlotte. It's consolidation. Do you need it? Is Michael Porter Jr. giving you a ton of what you need? He has 2 years left, but like that type of shooting around LaMelo would be super dangerous. And so I'd like to see them kind of stack the deck with more shooting, because let's not just see like what does LaMelo look like with real NBA players. Let's optimize the offense around him to see the heights to which he can carry it, because for the most part this year when he was on the floor, they were above average in offensive efficiency. When you look at who was available and who was playing alongside him, like, that's not necessarily easy to do. I don't know. I'm sure there's a bunch of players who could have done it, but it's not like you couldn't have just thrown Tyus Jones in here and Charlotte would have done the same thing during LaMelo Ball's minutes.
If they do something like that, can't you imagine us and Charlotte wins 39 games and LaMelo has an all-star season? Are we just giving them a bunch of shit because they're the Bulls now? You know, you know what I mean? Like, if
they haven't short-circuited their future, so no, if they traded like picks and stuff to be like, let's pair DeMar DeRozan and Vooch and Zach LaVine, sure.
Well, if they literally became the Bulls, I just think like, because we're deep in the playoffs as we're recording this, I am constantly thinking about how there's just levels to this, and what we're talking about, like, let's surround LaMelo with some talent to see what there is. Like, that's so far below being a competitive, like, real playoff team that it's almost just like, well, now I'm just like, you might as well trade him and just start from scratch, because like I could see them becoming a play-in team, or maybe like especially in the East, maybe they're the 6 or 7 seed, but like, I guess as long as you're not sending out firsts to accomplish what you're talking about, then sure. But the worst thing you can do is, and the most on-brand old school Charlotte thing you could do, is short circuit a little bit of this patient stuff and try to win 42 games, you know, because you have LaMelo and you need to see what's there.
And I agree that if you're short circuiting things to do that, then the answer should be, well, then just move LaMelo, like, if that's the alternative. But I just don't, I guess I don't think it's that binary yet. I think you have another year to play around with this, and just like, you know, so you have the non-taxpayer mid-level, and it's, let's just bring in like some higher culture guys where it's, imagine if they just gave the non-taxpayer, this flies in the face of put shooting around him, but like, imagine putting Steven Adams on this team as your 5. Like, that's just like do stuff like that. Like, go out, trade for shooting, sign like a high character guy and someone who's actually useful with the mid-level. And I think, look, I know they have Grant Williams. I know they have Diabate on this roster. I know Mark Williams is technically still there. I'm like kind of infatuated with like, no, let's try some different type of stuff at the 5. I don't think you can get Naz Reid with the mid-level, but like Brook Lopez isn't a terrible fit here. Al Horford could be fun if he's just doesn't have mid-level offers and they're willing to give him the most money there. But like, I think that's the pathway for them, is like, let's put more shooting on the court. I would like to see them figure out like the 5 spot rotation with someone, if not more permanent, I'll say better than Mark Williams / Grant Williams, who will come back from injury / Diabate, that whole 9. I'm also looking at like, will anyone give you anything for Miles Bridges? Like, that's not someone that I feel inclined to keep around if I'm them.
Sure. I think I would co-sign what you're saying of like, it's almost like you're asking the Hornets to kind of do their due diligence on like, what could we actually accomplish with LaMelo surrounded by like a real supporting cast. You probably should find that out before you make the decision I keep pushing them towards, of like, either move him or really go for it. Like, it's kind of like I kept talking about this season's Rockets as like they're on a fact-finding mission. Like, let's see what these guys look like together. How good can they be? Like, Charlotte maybe should. I think I would co-sign that idea as long as there was like this understanding that we're pulling the ripcord if he gets hurt again and or this just doesn't work and we're really moving on.
And you know what? That's the tough part of it all, too, is because I would argue against moving LaMelo now, because I wouldn't say his value's at its nadir, but it's coming off, like, finishes the season on the shelf. But you could also say, well, that doesn't mean his trade value is going to go up. Like, how long has it been since he finished the season healthy? And you could say, well, part of that is the situation they are in. But like, we are now 3 years, like 2021, 2022, his sophomore season was the last time he missed fewer than 20 games.
Yeah,
that is like,
no, it's a calculated risk either way. You know what I mean? Like, you can bet on him being better and, you know, bumping up that trade value, or just proving to be so good that you're like, we're never trading him. Or things could get worse. Like, that I don't think we account for that. Like, his value could be lower. That really is true. I like the like, let's see what's up year kind of idea.
Yeah, and it's
them. Especially in the East, you might make the playoffs.
Right, and I also think, by the way, and this might be where we would diverge, is I think he's kind of, maybe not indispensable to, but he's important to, like, if you want to streamline the development of Brandon Miller and whoever you take at number 4, having someone who could do the heavy lifting on offense makes their jobs easier and allows you to bring them along more slowly. Now, you could say, like, well, I just don't think that he's going to uplift guys like that. I think he is capable of that player. It just, for me, comes down to, can we see him play in 60-plus games again?
Right. It'd be a real different conversation about him if he just didn't have the injury stuff.
You got anything else to say on this team before we skedaddle, or are you ready to take us out of here?
I think that's going to do it for Charlotte. Thanks, everybody, for listening, for watching. Remember to rate, review, subscribe, give us a thumbs up on YouTube, leave us a comment there. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Join our Discord. Links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. I think that's good. Man, we've banged that out. That's good. Okay, Charlotte was much more interesting than I thought. Hopefully their offseason is more interesting.
We were just
than it
asking
seems
questions,
like it might be.
folks.
We were just asking questions. That's all. Don't take them to heart. We're not trying to trade LaMelo. Shouts Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.